This hour of Hugh Hewitt starts right now on Salem News Channel.
Good morning, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Northwestern and Princeton both won their NC2A games last night. I'm preparing for the end of the world. I'm looking for the meteor. We'll run down the NC2As and the fact that Xi is going to go hug Putin coming up on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You won't want to miss a minute. This hour of Hugh Hewitt is on Salem News Channel.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt live. I woke up this morning to the news that both Princeton and Northwestern had won their first round NC2A tournament games, and I began scanning the night sky in California for a meteor. I mean, Northwestern and Princeton both win their first round. I don't know that that's ever happened before. Duke won. That's the other smart kid school. So that's kind of, we're used to Duke winning because they have a subdivision, a basketball major that people take advantage of. But I'm just amazed. We had Duke, UCLA, Penn State won something. Now that's kind of remarkable. If you're an Ohio State fan, you realize Penn State doesn't win a lot. I told you that Arkansas won too, so Senator Cotton will be a little bit insufferable. But maybe by Saturday night they'll have come down to earth. Auburn, Northwestern, Tennessee, and Houston. And if you don't know this, a lot of Beltway journalism depends upon the output of Medill School graduates. I think Medill is probably the best connected journalism school, more than Columbia, more than Missouri, more than the other fine programs like Syracuse and Ohio University, which is not an accredited college, but nevertheless has a good television program. Miami of Ohio. There are lots of great journalism programs in America, but the best is probably Medill. Because they do it as undergraduates, not as graduates. And then the network effects of the Medill mob are just extraordinary inside of Washington, D.C. But they're all up. They're not working today. They're not listening to this. They're all hung over. But that's good news. Now, let me give you the other good news. Wall Street banks are going to put $30 billion into the First Republic Bank, so that's not going to fail over the weekend, so that's good. Then the Wall Street Journal helpfully tells us that bank failures, like earlier shocks, raise the odds of a recession. Do you think? What is most amusing on the morning is the New York Times story on what happened last weekend when Team Biden bailed out the Silicon Valley Bank and the Signature Bank because they're blue banks from Silicon Valley and Manhattan. And the long story, I put it over at my Twitter account, you can go find it, concludes that nobody saw these interest rates coming. Well, if you've been listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show since January of 2021, so for 2 years and 2 months since Joe Biden blew everything and then blew 3 more rounds of spending, you have to be a dummy not to know that inflation will follow. So I'm not buying that. Most important story of the morning by far is that Xi Jinping is going to visit Vladimir Putin next week in Russia. So Big Brother is going to go see Little Brother who's gotten himself into trouble. And what are we going to do? And Xi is going to go fix it, and Xi is going to be more powerful as a result of this. And at the same time, though, a bit of good news. China is becoming just an immediate existential threat to the West because we're just asleep, and they are everywhere. It's as though when the Athenians went to address the Melian assembly, the Spartan came to them and said, the Melians went to the Spartans and said, while you were at home, they are constantly abroad. And so while we're screwing around at home on this and that and various woke stuff, the CCP is constantly abroad like the Athenians. It doesn't end well for China, but it didn't end well for Sparta either. They're not around. Here's a good bit of news. Wall Street Journal this morning. Silicon Valley and Capitol Hill build an anti-China alliance. A group of Silicon Valley executives, including Peter Thiel, and Washington lawmakers are quietly mobilizing against China's involvement in the U.S. tech industry. They plan to meet for a private dinner on Wednesday to discuss China national security and intensifying competition between the tech sectors of the U.S. and China. This is before TikTok gets hammered. TikTok's going to be out of business in the United States before long. Here's the deal. I love this Hill and Valley Forum. The key thing is from whom will the Silicon Valley big tech people listen to advice? They might go get Ambassador Robert O'Brien. They might get the Deputy National Security Advisor, Matt Pottinger. Go get Representative Mike Gallagher. Go get Representative Michael Waltz. Go get yourself the Michael Pillsbury. If he's around, get good information in, you'll get a good product out. But if you sit around listening to Wall Street bankers, as you have for the last 30 years, you're not going to get good information on what the CCP is up to. It requires an entirely different set of lenses than we've had for 30 years, since the end of the Cold War. We got to put back on our superpower competition lenses. Yesterday, Roger Wicker went to the Senate floor, senator from Mississippi, friend of the program, and he's begun this effort. Let's listen to cut number 9.
In American history, one foreign and defense policy has succeeded above all others, a national policy of preparedness. President Washington said, "To be prepared for war is one of the most effective means of preserving peace." Theodore Roosevelt called it wielding a big stick, and President Reagan called it peace through strength. Indeed, we ought to listen to those great captains of American purpose. We should rearm and strengthen the United States so no adversary dreams of acting against our interest. With that in mind, I want to start with Taiwan and Ukraine. Without a doubt, there's no greater challenge than deterring Xi Jinping from taking Taiwan. Failing to defend Taiwan would plunge the globe into an economic depression and end our hopes for an American-led century.
Let's go on with Senator Wicker for two more cuts. Cut number 10.
To ensure that never happens, Congress should pursue four priorities with Taiwan this year. First, we should pressure the Biden administration to exercise the $1 billion of drawdown authority we provided them in the Taiwan Enhanced Resilience Act last year. Second, we should match Taipei's growing investment in critical capabilities. I'm disappointed that the Biden administration has once again failed to request foreign military financing money for Taiwan. Congress will have to act. Third, we should fix the foreign military sales backlog and pursue real reforms to the process. Right now, it takes us too long to get crucial weapons to our allies. For example, unless something changes, Taiwan will wait nearly a decade to get a recent order of harpoons. Fourth, we should expand our work with allies and partners to help Taiwan defend itself with military and non-military tools of power.
I want to play one more. Stop right there. I want to make sure we get the key where he sticks the landing. This is Senator Wicker yesterday, cut number 14.
I had the privilege of leading Congress to pass the SHIPS Act, which requires the Navy, in statute, to achieve a 355-ship fleet as soon as practicable. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has shirked its responsibility to enforce this statute and to maintain American naval superiority. The administration has repeatedly sent Congress requests to actually shrink the fleet. This is unacceptable. It should be unacceptable on
Senator
both sides of
Wicker,
the aisle.
finally, and we need to have this conversation ongoing because the China challenge is real. Xi is going to be with Putin. Their little buddy over Khamenei and Iran is part 3. We need serious people doing serious things at a serious time. For example, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, who went in to talk to the Howard University basketball team after they were disappointed with their opening round loss. Cut number 18.
You guys are so good. You guys are so good. You played hard. You played to the very last second. You made all us Bisons so proud. You hustled out there. You are smart. You are disciplined. You put everything you had into the game. And you know, that's what it's about, right? Until the last minute. You guys did that. You didn't stop until the last second. You did not stop. And that is so inspiring. So you keep playing with chin up and shoulders back. Because you showed the world who Bison are. Right? I mean, literally what you have done is in historic proportion. You know, I was at Howard back in the day where we were just happy that there was a game, much less getting to this place, right? And
Okay, I can't bear it anymore. The Howard University Bison got blown out by the Jayhawks last night. I mean, they're the 16th seed. The Jayhawks are one of the best teams in the country. The Jayhawks won 96-68. And I'm thinking about those poor kids, the players, these young men who have gone to the dance and they just got smoked, blown off of the floor. And strolls the Vice President of the United States to give them the worst pep talk I've ever heard. But then again, you don't give pep talks to people after they lose unless you're the coach and you know maybe the worst. That's an episode of Veep. I may have to rewatch Veep because we've got real live Veep. And if there was any network in America that had gumption, they'd be doing a weekly show on the adventures of Vice President Harris. Stay tuned, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm sorry, Howard. You didn't join Northwestern and Princeton, but next year, and we'll keep the VP away. Well, good Friday, America. It's not raining in California, so I'm considering that a victory, and I'm getting my voice back after a week of battling whatever it is that Genghis Kate and gang gave to me. Got through class yesterday, reeled home, went to sleep around 5 o'clock last night in California. Because it's just one of those 2-week runs that at the end of it, you're looking forward to the weekend, and I'm doing nothing. I'm giving a speech today, but I'll get a nap before then. Here is the deal. Yesterday on this show, Congressman Ro Khanna very, very correctly looked straight into the camera and said, "You know, Hugh, we're going to bail out every bank." I'm paraphrasing, but if someone goes under, we're going to guarantee all deposits. That is not the law, right? That's what most people wanted to hear, but that is not the law. And then Janet Yellen went up to the Hill and told James Lankford, one of the smartest senators up there, this, cut number 4. Maybe not. We got cut number 4 ready to go. Now the machine is what do we call this machine?
Will the deposits in every community bank in Oklahoma, regardless of their size, be fully insured now? Are they fully recovered? Every bank, every community bank in Oklahoma, regardless of the size of the deposit, will they get the same treatment that SVBP just got or Signature Bank just got?
A bank only gets that treatment if a majority of the FDIC board, a supermajority of the Fed board, and I, in consultation with the president, determine that the failure to protect uninsured depositors would create systemic risk and significant economic and financial consequences.
So what is
and
your
we
plan?
Made that determination.
Right. So what is your plan to keep large depositors from moving their funds out of community banks into the big banks? We have seen the mergers of banks over the past decade. I'm concerned you're about to accelerate that by encouraging anyone who has a large deposit in a community bank to say, we're not going to make you whole, but if you go to one of our preferred banks, we will make you whole at that point.
Look, I mean, that's certainly not something that we're encouraging.
That is happening right now.
That is happening because depositors are concerned about the bank failures that have happened and whether or not other banks could also
No,
fail.
it's happening
And
because you're fully insured no matter what the amount is. If you're in a big bank, you're not fully insured if you're in a community bank.
Well, you're not fully insured. And
you were at Signature, and it just barely met that threshold. You were at Signature.
Well, we felt that there was a serious risk of contagion that could have brought down and triggered runs on many banks, and that's something, given that our judgment is that the banking system overall is safe and sound, depositors should have confidence in the system, and we took these actions.
So there's a special assessment that's been done
contagion.
on community banks in my state and all banks across the country. Was there any discussion that that special assessment would only apply to the larger banks, or was it always assumed the special assessment would cover every bank, including rural banks in my state?
I think I'm not certain what the rules are around that. That's for the FDIC to determine.
It has been reported publicly that SVB had a large number of Chinese investors that are there, including some that were companies directly connected to the Chinese Communist Party. Will those individuals, companies, entities, and investors that are Chinese investors be made whole based on assessments in my banks in Oklahoma? So what I'm asking is, will my banks in Oklahoma pay a special assessment to be able to make Chinese investors whole from Silicon Valley Bank?
Uninsured investors will be made whole in that bank, and I suppose that
Answer
could
means
include-
yes. Senator Lankford, could you please move on to something else? Because we don't want the country to understand that our friends in Silicon Valley and Manhattan just got bailed out by the good people of Oklahoma, and in the course of doing so, we sent a lot of money to the Chi-Coms. And that's what she said. And that's not what Ro Khanna said, and that's what I've been afraid of from the beginning. One rule. One rule, not an objective. Oh, well, we take a look at it, and we got to get a supermajority vote, and maybe it's not systemic. That is exactly the opposite of what Ro Khanna, liberal from Silicon Valley, said yesterday, which is everybody's guaranteed. Look, here we have my relief factor, and it's time to take it for the weekend. Not that I work. Is it going to rain this weekend? I don't know. Rains every other day here in California. If I had a producer, we'd play that song every day. But I'm hoping to get to the beach tomorrow morning. Therefore, I'm taking my relief factor. Ooh, the little bit of hot coffee because it was completely empty, and I put in the hot coffee, and that's hard to do. ReliefFactor.com, $19.95 gets you the 3-week starter pack, and you'll get rid of those minor aches and pains that come with long walks, trundles, runs, riding your Peloton, rowing your skull. That's what Dwayne does on the weekend. He rolls his skull. Dwayne is actually going to band day. He's coming out of retirement as a band parent. And so we need to get him some ReliefFactor.com. When they pull you out of the bullpen, you're like Raleigh fingers for band dads. And we need to get ReliefFactor.com over to Generalissimo right away. Because if he's going to be Raleigh fingers of the band community, we've got to have him limbered up. Stay tuned, America. Welcome back, America. St. Patrick's Day greetings to you. This always makes me think of Uncle Sid and the Doherty sisters. For all I know, they're still playing at Jonathan Edwards in Cambridge, but that's where I spend St. Patrick's Day. Now, here's the deal. If you're a Catholic and you wake up this morning and you say to yourself, I'm supposed to abstain from meat on St. Patrick's Day, I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is 70% of the bishops in the United States have issued a dispensation from the requirement to abstain from meat on this day. The bad news, of course, is that 3 out of 10 haven't. Now, this is where forum shopping comes in. If you are a skilled lawyer, like me, you know that if you have an opportunity to take a permit application or a court case to venue A or venue B, and that venue A is run by, let's say, Judge Manny Real, and venue B is run by, we've got some great, let's use Justice Barry Anderson, wonderful justice in Minnesota. And you have a choice. I can take this to Judge Real, or and I've been in Judge Real's courtroom, second chair, thank goodness, because he was yelling at Bill Halley. And or I can go to David Carter's courtroom. I'm going to go to David Carter's courtroom because he's going to yell at me, but he's going to throw me out with some grace, which he's done before. So there's forum shopping among Catholics today. Now, I got my email from Archbishop Burbidge, and that's where I live. That's my diocese in the state in which I am resident, a citizen voter, Virginia. But I am presently in Orange County, having learned that Bishop Burbidge has issued the dispensation. I am going to do the lawyerly thing and not look to see what Bishop Van has done in Orange County. And this is my recommendation to you. Line up all the archdioceses of which you may be a member. You know, I've got Youngstown Archdiocese, I've got the Portland Archdiocese, I've got the Orange County Archdiocese, I've got the Arlington Archdiocese, and I could get into D.C. if I needed to. So I'm just going to forum shop and then take that with me. And I believe that's a very Catholic approach.
What happened to one rule?
That's one rule is forum shop. That's the rule. One rule is forum shop. So I'm just saying, I got my letter from Burbidge saying, and the bishop, I've never met him, but he's now my friend, and I am forum shopping. And I think it's legit.
You're the Janet Yellen of Catholics.
I am. That's true. That's true. But you, on the other hand,
you're the only Catholic that gets bailed out.
Yeah, well,
it's like a blue hue bailout.
I'm a bailout Catholic. No, now listen, there's an important issue here in front of us, is that, as many of you know, Generalissimo, that voice on the other end of the line, who does he'll be doing the Grand Old Pod this morning.
And the funny parts of this show.
Yeah, the funny. Okay, the parts that you are actually entertained. That's Dwayne. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, that's Dwayne. He sat in for me poorly last week, I might add. And I'm sorry to all of you who've been complaining. But Generalissimo is a band dad, or was a band dad. His son and I can't use his name.
We refer to him as the miscellaneous random person that I live with.
Yes.
The male edition, yes.
The male edition of the miscellaneous. And that person is in college now. So yes. Dwayne is no longer running the buses in and out of the band gate.
I am band dad alumnus.
Yeah, but they went into the bullpen over the weekend, and they said, we need a band dad with experience. We need a band dad who's been there with a baton. We need a band dad who can deal with jazz band, because jazz band is different.
Jazz festival is upon us, and they are a little short on volunteers.
So they went and they got you Raleigh Fingers coming out of the ball. Dennis Eckersley rolling out. And those are the two best relievers of my lifetime. So you're going to go do what at the band gathering?
Process audio. Something I'm completely unfamiliar with. Yes.
That's a lovely weekend.
Yes.
What are you going to you're not going to use this equipment, are you? I don't want band music next week.
I can do it all on my laptop. It's all of the judges that judge the bands that perform. They have little hand recorders, and they record their notes that are supposed to be only for the band directors. And so
will you release that to me? Will you leak me all their audio?
See, they want a grown-up to do that editing and not a kid.
No, I want the raw material, because it's
the raw material is sometimes a little off.
Yeah, you might be like Kevin McCarthy giving Tucker Carlson all the January 6th tapes.
It actually can be like that. Yes.
So I would we could have a scoop. What do the band directors really think?
It's not it's the judges.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
By the way, I've been a speech and debate judge, and I love it. And my retirement plan is to find a high school that wants a broken old down talk show host and lawyer to be their speech and debate coach, because I love it. But when I do it, when I judge, I'm just hell on wheels, because I had some terrible judges when I did that 50 years ago. I had some remarkably bad. So when you walk into my room and I'm smiling at you, I've actually got death in my eyes. I'm the Grim Reaper of speech and debate judges.
Oh, I have seen the seamy side of these tournaments.
Of band camp.
A band director comes in and says, "Who's in charge here?" And we point at the guy in charge, and they say, Who judged us? And we show him who the judge was. Well, that guy's been out of the game for 30 years. He shouldn't be judging us. Okay.
I'm telling you right now, this is a
what score
this
do you
could be
want?
a mini series on Netflix.
Oh, it's grand. It's just spectacular.
The Jazz Band Festival. So you're doing that this weekend.
Yes.
Now the reason I bring that up, the newsworthiness, is we have a great sponsor, myphdweightloss.com.
We do.
It was my experience as a speech and debate coach and judge, and as a swim judge. My 3 judging jobs. This did not happen when I sat pro tem.
How do you judge
claims.
Swimming?
You make sure that they use a two-handed touch.
If you don't drown, you get a 10?
No. When the worst part of my career as a swimming judge is when I'm the swim judge for 5 and 6-year-olds, and parents are yelling at me to DQ them because their butterfly click is wrong. They're barely alive. By the end, they do 25 yards of butterfly, and some parent is yet DQ that kid. I said, I'm not DQing a 5-year-old.
They're lucky they're not wearing floaties.
Yeah, I'm just showing them that someday there will be a judge who actually cares on the side. We're just modeling a little bit.
Right.
So anyway, being a judge in swimming, speech and debate, the good part of it is people bring you snacks. When I was a statistician in high school, because I was not going to play, people bring you snacks. So people will be bringing you snacks, I assume?
There is actually a room set up for judges and band directors to go eat. They have a separate food room, and we're allowed to go to that.
Yeah, there's a food room at every Salem event that I try and stay out of.
I avoid that, actually.
The Orange Food Group is dominant in that.
Yep.
And by the way, I blew through my 1 box of Do-Si-Do Orange Food Group cookies. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt bought 1 box.
I still have a garage full of Girl Scout cookies.
Well, are they any of them Do-Si-Dos?
They haven't made Do-Si-Dos in about
I ate them last
years.
night. The peanut butter sandwich.
Okay, well, we have those, but they haven't been called Do-Si-Dos forever.
Well, what are they called?
Peanut butter sandwiches.
Well, they're Do-Si-Dos.
Okay,
and so,
whatever. I have.
Are you selling any of those, or are you hanging on to those?
Yeah, you want some more?
Oh, you betcha. I love Do-Si-Dos.
I
can eat a slave of Do-Si-Dos.
I can make that happen.
All right. Well, that's a deal, because myphdweightloss.com does not want you in the Do-Si-Dos. And you don't not to eat the snacks that they bring you at the judge's table.
Yes.
You're not going to do that.
No.
Okay. myphdweightloss.com. Work for Dwayne. Lost 50 pounds. 864. 1900.
That's 864.
644. Now, you know our friend Guy Benson.
The Northwestern guy?
Yeah, he's wearing. If you don't see an N on his outer garment, it's on his underwear.
One of the Medill goons.
Yeah, he's one of the Medill goons.
Yes, I know Guy Benson.
Yeah, so Guy Benson is coming on the cruise with us.
Yes.
September 7th through the 21st.
You think we can get TSA to take his Northwestern stuff out of it?
That's plan number 1.
Okay.
But generally,
yes,
I am willing to bet you, and I'm going to plant this question right now. We're not going to tell Guy. First meeting of the cruise group, I'm going to say, Mr. Benson, can you describe for us Northwestern's first round win in the 2023 tournament? Do you think he'll be able to do so?
Well, absolutely. He probably
will be able to do a play-by-play.
Of course he will.
He was there last night. The only time Guy Benson leaves the Beltway is when there's a purple N traveling somewhere. He called every sport at Northwestern. And I'm afraid for our cruise that if they win another game, this is the greatest thing to have ever happened in Northwestern basketball.
This is Northwestern. They're not going to win another game.
You're not going to win a second game. You're right. Princeton's going to get blown out, too. But Princeton beat Arizona. How about that?
They did their job. They blew up all the brackets.
There isn't one person left in America with a good bracket.
Exactly. I mean,
Joe Biden picked Arizona to win it all, and Princeton beat him. And do you remember him telling Sam Alito that he hated Princeton?
What exactly?
Yeah, so
but this, Joe Biden hasn't got anything right in 40 years,
I
right?
know, and
Including
I
the
just love
basketball
fact
grid.
He said to Sam Alito in Sam Alito's confirmation hearing, I hate Princeton, and he got so much flack. The next day, he came in wearing a Princeton hat, doing penance, and now Princeton. And then, so he filled out a bracket trying to be very Obama-like. But Joe Biden didn't know anything about it. Joe Biden knows about as much about NCAA basketball as I do, which is, there's a tournament on. I'll watch the last game, and I hope Duke wins. That's what I know about basketball. Sorry, everybody else. Sorry to my UNC in-laws, Russ and Aaron. Sorry, Hope. Fact of the matter is, I'm rooting for Duke, even though I don't even know who their coach is anymore. It's not Coach K. So I just want everyone to know, on the cruise, we will put an absolute time limit on Guy Benson on Northwestern Sports.
No, we're just going to put a time limit on Guy Benson. That's all you need to say.
You can find him in the bar.
Yes.
All right. HughCruise.com or go over to HughHewitt.com and click on the banner.
Right.
Let me do my market report brought to you by Birch Gold. And the good news is the $30 billion that showed up somehow mysteriously for First Republic overnight has settled markets in Europe. So everyone's happy in Europe. We're not having a banking crisis this weekend. Gold, however, went up to $1,932 an ounce. That's $7 an ounce more than yesterday at this time. And gold remains the choice of people who are saying, this just doesn't feel right to me. I think I'll put 5 to 10% of my assets in physical precious metals. And you can either buy them direct from Birch Gold. You go to HughGold.com or text my name Hugh to 989898. Or they'll open up an IRA or 401k and they'll be the third party independent intermediary that makes it legit. But 5 to 10% of your wealth should be in either dirt or gold. Real estate, gold, and silver. Nothing exotic, nothing fancy. Just have something to hang on to if everything else falls apart. But that's not happening this weekend. Not happening. Not going to happen. Promise you. Because Joe Biden's in charge. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Joined now by the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Hugh. You know, I rarely comment on my own poetry, but recent events have forced me to do so. Some weeks ago, I wondered, like I heard some drummer drumming, and I wrote a rhyming warning where I stated, something's coming. The host gave the opinion, he's a most expressive frowner, that the poem that I presented had been something of a downer. I agreed with his opinion, and I answered, but of course, as a poet, I felt a disturbance in the force. Since that Friday we've experienced, among some other lapses, monsoons, spy balloons, and a couple bank collapses. And because I wrote on feelings, not on inside information, I'm stand before you basking in the sun of vindication. We poets hear the future just as clear as clocks are ticking. Why doesn't that apply to all the stocks that I've been picking? Regardless, I'll reiterate, before this verse is finished, the feeling I was feeling has not weakened or diminished. I'm a very happy fellow who's been overwhelmed by dread, and this, friends, is the image that keeps flashing in my head. I'm an unsuspecting engineer munching on some snacks. My train goes round a curve, and there's Godzilla on the tracks. I hope I'm mistaken, that my error margin's large, but I don't think that I'm wrong when you consider who's in charge.
No, Joe, I was going to say, the title of this has got to be Vindication.
Sweet vindication.
Sweet vindication. You know what? You did call this. You did, Nostradamus Joe. So we're going to have to say now he's in the prophecy business.
Yeah, well, I could, yes. My oracle fees are higher than my poetry.
You know, did you ever read what the Oracle of Delphi would say to people who showed up? Nothing that made any sense.
That's right. When you, if you attack so and so, an empire will fall.
Hey, I got a quick question for you. I talked with Jamie Rosen about Scalia driving from Queens to Manhattan on the subway with a rifle in the 40s going to St. Xavier's. Did you ever ride around on a subway from Queens to Manhattan with a rifle going to your Jesuit school?
No, but I carried some very odd supplies once. I was in charge of the hockey team. It's kind of like Catcher in the Rye, and I had like 27 hockey sticks that I had to carry on the subway. and I felt like abandoning them, but I didn't.
You know, you people from Queens. I wonder if Scalia grew up near where you did. Have you read yet the book, or have any idea where he grew up?
No, I was from Bayside, which is the very far end of Queens, the last town in Queens on the North Shore, just a little bit closer in than from where Great Gatsby had East Egg and West Egg. Those are my area of Queens. Although not.
Well, I can't remember it offhand, but I will go in and I'm going to double check because you might be vindicated here as well. Sweet Vindication is Joe's payback poem. And I want to let people know if you want to pay Joe, he'll write you a poem. You got to write him at tarzanajoe@reagan.com for any purpose whatsoever, provided it's not obscene. tarzanajoe@reagan.com. It is Lent after all. Will Sweet Vindication be posted at tarzanajoe.com?
Absolutely. This week I wrote a wedding vows for people, which was a first. Not just a wedding toast, but wedding vows, which I enjoyed incredibly. And I wrote a retirement poem for a person who was saying goodbye to a job he loved, and it was a nice week.
You know, it's the best job in America if you get good commissions. tarzanajoe@reagan.com. Joe, thank you, my friend. Have a great one.
Thank you, Hugh.
I should have asked him about whether or not he's forum shopping between the Archdiocese of New York and the Archdiocese of L.A. when it comes to eating meat today on St. Patrick's Day, but I forgot. Paul Jacobs just got back from a place where there isn't much to eat, regardless of whether it's Friday or not. He just got back from Guatemala and Honduras with Food for the Poor. Here's what Paul had to say.
These are families in this post-pandemic era. There are moms and families who they lost their jobs through the pandemic, and those jobs haven't returned. There are many families who are saying the rising cost of food has gotten so untenable that they cannot even afford the basics. And so you stand in between these families right now with your gift.
The Food for the Poor campaign that we are conducting, many dozens of you gave money yesterday, and I hope those of you who are going to celebrate St. Patrick's Day set aside maybe a tithe of what you were going to spend at the bar tonight, and go over to HughHewitt.com and click that button, Food for the Poor. Gallagher, of all people, my gosh, he's insufferable on St. Patrick's Day. Gallagher had two of his audience members donate $5,000 each yesterday, so I got like 25 emails from Mike telling me, did you notice that my audience is deeply moved and generous? And I said, my audience is deeply moved and generous. But Gallagher, of course, pretends to be Irish when in fact he is, well, I'm not going to tell you what his ethnicity is. It doesn't matter to me. But that Gallagher bit, that's a stage name. That's all that is. But if on St. Patrick's Day you want to celebrate caring for the poor and you want to do it the right way, head over to HughHewitt.com, hit the banner at the top, Food for the Poor. In fact, I'm going to come back and talk with one of the key Food for the Poor executives. Don't go anywhere, America. It's St. Patrick's Day 2023. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
This hour of Hugh Hewitt starts right now on Salem News Channel.
Good morning, America. First Republic Bank has been propped up by the largest banks in the United States, so we're not going to have another weekend of wondering what's going to fall over. In fact, things have settled down, and we'll talk about it coming up on this hour of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You won't want to miss a minute. This hour of Hugh Hewitt is on Salem News Channel.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt. Just putting out the news to America that 7 out of 10 Catholic bishops have granted a dispensation from the requirement to abstain from eating meat today so that St. Patrick's Day celebrations can go forward. I am curious and asked Anitra Parmele to join me and talk about what Food for the Poor is doing on this St. Patrick's Day as Americans celebrate. Good morning, Anitra. How are you?
Good morning. So grateful to be with you and to invite your listeners to be a part of an extraordinary St. Patrick's Day. I mean, we're offering them an invitation to step into the lives of families throughout the 17 countries where Food for the Poor serves. Countries you've visited, you stood in feeding lines, you've had a chance to actually distribute the food and to look into the eyes of the mothers. It's one thing to talk about the impact of COVID or to talk about how rising food prices, which are an inconvenience often to us, are devastating to families. It's another to go to a feeding center that we last saw bustling with children, and they're now virtually shuttered. So we want to invite you to change that. Right now, a gift of $144 provides a family of 4 food for a year.
Anitra, would you tell people how long you've been with Food for the Poor and why we always select Food for the Poor to partner with? Because I know what your record is and how it came to be, and I trust you with our money. Would you tell people about your own experience with Food for the Poor and the history of the organization?
Well, I'm from South Florida, and so I was aware of Food for the Poor, but I think I did not know just the reach and the heft of the organization. In so many of these countries, we're the largest non-governmental organization, and we come in with efficiency, with partnerships on the ground, with alliance with pastors, ministers on this St. Patrick's Day, to know that your gift is going to be distributed by pastors on the ground who are able to say, there is a God who sees you and knows you, and he has heard your prayers, is an incredible exchange. But that's why we're able to say something audacious like $144 provides a family of 4 with food for a year. So in my 4 years with Food for the Poor, I've had a chance to travel, to stand in front of mothers, to stand in front of fathers. You know yourself. It's one thing to read the headlines, to be a scholar, to look deeply into statistics and what's going on in our world. It's another to see the human stories behind the statistics.
Until one goes into the hillside slums of the Dominican Republic or you climb up to the favelas of Brazil's Rio, you actually don't get it. You're doing the right thing by saying, oh, there are hungry children, I'll help, but you really don't get it. The poorest people live at the farthest top of the mountain because they have to go the farthest for the food and the water distribution center. Right. So there are some things you only get from putting eyes on. This year, there are a lot of needs. I mean, the audience came through for Turkey after the earthquake. They came through last year for Ukraine. What about the ordinary bunting and hitting of keeping people alive in Haiti and Honduras and Guatemala? Have people continue to support your efforts there?
We've been so grateful because they have bridged that gap. They have given to families whose faces they won't see. They have taken on as their own that burden, because you're exactly right. I remember traveling into Haiti. As I said, I'm from South Florida. A speed bump is a high altitude for me. And to climb into the mountains and to meet Mary Lude and to ask her about her life, I was so honored that she shared with me. But she said, I feel abandoned by my government, by my community. And then she paused and she said, I feel abandoned by God. I feel like he can't see me here. And in your name, because I feel like I travel on behalf of your listeners to make that connection, to bring those stories back. And on behalf of you, I was able to say, oh, Mary Lude, that is a lie. You are seen. You are remembered. And even now, God is moving on his people to meet your needs. So that's what we're inviting you to be a part of. I mean, on a Friday morning, to be a part of a miracle, a transformational story is a pretty good transaction, knowing that
it is. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. It says give food. The banner is over there at HughHewitt.com. But Anitra, I want to ask you about how many different feeding centers you've been in the last 4 years.
Well, what I love about Food for the Poor is that each solution is unique to the situation. It's not cookie cutter. We don't go in with expectations. Well, this is how we do it well, so we're going to set up this. So I've been in distribution that's been as one-to-one as handing a mother a bag of food and saying, we'll be back next week. I've been a part of massive feeding centers that literally feed tens of thousands of people. And they're huge cauldrons and a line that stretches as far as the eye can see. So the variety has been an indication that Food for the Poor is responding to the needs on the ground rather than coming in with our own expectations. So, as you know, we've worked with you for Ukraine and with Turkey and Syria, and now to invite you to be a part of our core ask. The solutions are as varied as the situations.
I want to give the phone number as well, because Food for the Poor operates now in ways it never used to. You can send my name, HUGH, to 91999. That's a text. Send Hugh to 91999. Or give a call, 855-359-4673. 855-359-HOPE. That's 855-359-4673. Over on my Twitter account, I just tweeted out the link as well. Anitra, in terms of what it does to someone like you, you're a professional relief worker. You go in and out of these countries, or the poorest places on the earth. Do you get tired, worn down, or do you get energized by every visit?
I get energized by every visit because, Hugh, I'm somebody who internalizes. I'm very empathetic, but I'm able to look at a mother and just think, just you wait. Just you wait. When I hear a story of desperation, when she's boiling leaves, when we ask her, oh, I see steam rising out of a pot. What will you be serving your children? And she responds, I just do that so my children don't give up hope. We don't have anything for dinner. I know, because I've seen it. We've seen it. That transformation that happens when we bring their stories to you and invite you to step into those stories with a transformational power. It's on the other side of your one-time gift. I am energized because I can't wait to see that situation change.
So $144 feeds a family of four for a year, and $72 feeds two children for a year. I want people to go above that. Gallagher got two people to give $5,000 yesterday. I'll never hear the end of it. I know he's already called me 3 times to brag on his audience.
And reached out to me.
You see, that's just, that's Gallagher. He pretends to be an Irishman, and he's very good, but he's very good about communicating what you do. I want to close by saying,
we're all Irish today.
Yeah, we are. I am. I'm actually orange and green, so I can go by. What is Parmele?
You and
is
me
that,
both.
Yeah. Are you really orange and green?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Clonmel, the old country.
Lots of orange and green running around. Anitra, last question. I tell people that you specialize. Food for the Poor specializes in food, beans, and clean water. This is not elaborate stuff. This is feeding people. But without that, without water and food, they starve and they despair. Is that a good description?
Oh, it's an excellent description and very apt. Hugh, we look at it and we say something incredible like $144 rescues a family. Imagine the relief for a mother, a father who woke up this morning begging God for a single meal. When they get news that you've made a gift, that your gift is going to provide them food today, tomorrow, next week, next month, it seems incredible that people would say, oh, somebody else should do that. Somebody should really take care of that. That sounds like an excellent exchange. Well, may I suggest you can this morning be that someone. And
it's a perfect way to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com.
They have no idea. Help is on the way.
Yeah, help is on the way in the name of the good St. Patrick. Anitra, thank you for joining me. The Food for the Poor banner is over at the top of HughHewitt.com. They sponsor this campaign every Lent, and every Lent I tell my Catholic and Christian friends this is the best spiritual discipline there is, to give of your of your need, not of your excess, but of giving of your need and being as generous as possible. People like Anitra are out there making sure that your money is stewarded well and it gets to the poor and the starving of Central and South America and the Caribbean. Anitra, happy St. Patrick's Day. Talk to you again next year and continue your great work. Thank you. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
The Hugh Hewitt Show is now available on TV. Go to salemnewschannel.com or download the app. You can also watch on Roku and Fire Stick. Salem News Channel, the antidote to the mainstream media.
Welcome back, America. The Black Velvet Band is another of the regular songs that would be played by Uncle Sid and the Doherty Sisters. Now, if any of you out there know what happened to Uncle Sid and the Doherty Sisters, do tell me. You can reach me. Actually, you can't reach me. You can reach Generalissimo. We haven't set up subtext yet. I'm going to set up a subtext account. But there are about a gazillion. When you run Hewitt, HughHewitt.com for 23 years, it's a Mount Everest of spam. And occasionally, Dwayne will go down into this and unplug the sewer and then send me a couple of emails. Dwayne, if anyone sends you an email about Uncle Sid and the Doherty Sisters, would you please forward it to me? Just asking.
Sure.
All right. Now, Representative Michael Waltz is a congressman from Florida. My son works for him. I know him pretty well. And he's a member of the Nixon Seminar, which is how I know him. And he's Special Forces. He's still on reserve duty, Green Beret. I think the only Green Beret in Congress. Mike Waltz went on Fox News yesterday to talk about the continuing projection of nothing but weakness from the United States. Listen to this clip within mind. It's clip number 17. Within mind that yesterday Poland and Slovenia both sent MiG-29s to Ukraine, doing what we should have done months ago, which is send the fighter aircraft to defend the ground support aircraft that we haven't sent them either. But at least NATO countries are stepping up. Here's Congressman Waltz, cut number 17.
This is what is undergirding the entire Biden foreign policy. If we just get to the table, if we make enough concessions, if we're nice enough to our adversaries, if we can get them to cooperate with us on climate and those other agendas, then they'll reciprocate in kind. And instead, what we've seen is they view that as weak. No, absolutely, they view it as weakness. They're on the march, whether it's Iran on the march towards a nuke, China continuing to threaten Taiwan more and more aggressively, and the largest land war in Europe since World War II. But all of these incidences and our lack of response all add up, whether it's doing nothing in response to the Colonial Pipeline, advocating for lifting sanctions on Nord Stream, saying only a minor incursion, might be met with not that much of a response, or downing one of our drones in international waters, which I do believe was deliberate. They were determined to stop it one way or another. All of those things add up to send a message that they can get away with it. And all of our other adversaries, North Korea included, and now ISIS and Al-Qaeda that are reconstituting in Afghanistan, are all watching. They smell weakness in this White House, and they're going to take full advantage of it.
They are indeed. And meanwhile, a few people with sane and stable points of view. For example, Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi took aim at China yesterday on the Senate floor, cut number 13.
Competitiveness. While our fundamentals remain strong here in America, the Chinese are out competing us in multiple arenas. The Chinese are running the so-called 100-year marathon. To them, victory in that race means toppling American global leadership. We need to make the long-term investments to compete in the coming decades on this marathon. The Chinese Communist Party is working overtime to achieve what they call the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation by 2049. Their goal is to be the global center of economic, political, and military power. China has pulled off the fastest military buildup in history, and they are still building, Madam President. Beijing has achieved real growth in its defense budget every year for 2 straight decades. Every year for 2 straight decades. It is quite likely they already spend more than we do, particularly if we count only our China-focused military spending. These investments are paying off for Xi Jinping. Quite honestly, in many areas of warfare, China's military already exhibits greater quantity and sophistication than our own. I'm particularly concerned about the rapid advancement of the Chinese Navy compared to ours. The Secretary of the Navy recently shared a troubling fact. In one shipyard alone, the Chinese now boast more productive capacity than in every American shipyard combined.
Yeah, that is really stunning. And it ought to make all of you say, what in the world did we spend all that money that caused all this inflation that endangered all these banks on? Well, pennies for defense, not even pennies. Like slivers of copper for defense, trillions for the connected people with the Silicon Valley Bank. I think we're going to spend more on the Silicon Valley Bank than we are on the Navy this year. I'm not sure. It will come from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation bank vault, but who knows? New construction of ships, not the whole Navy, but new construction of ships. My guess is that we're spending more on SVB, but I'm not sure. ReliefFactor.com, great sponsor of the show. There is the bag. I took it in the first hour. I remind you in hours 2 and 3, do not leave home without it, especially if you're going to go work in a shipyard and protect America. But whatever you're going to do, today and on the weekend, if you're a weekend warrior, and maybe you're just going to sit around in your chair all weekend long and watch March Madness. I know there are people like that. I am not myself an NC2A basketball tourney nut, but I'll watch a little bit of it. But if your lower back gets tired from sitting in a chair, or you're generalissimo and you're a band dad called in from the bullpen, take ReliefFactor.com with you. Make sure that you stay up to date with it. $19.95 is the 3-week starter pack. Go to ReliefFactor.com. Tell them Hugh Hewitt sent you. Come right back. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. On St. Patrick's Day 2023, the big question is, are the banks stable? Now, $30 billion was rounded up last night to make sure First Republic is liquid. They got lots of assets, but there are other banks out there that are wobbly. And the problem in restoring confidence is not what was done last weekend, making whole the connected depositors at the Silicon Valley Bank and the Signature Bank. Those are blue state banks in blue state, blue areas with blue investors and a lot of tech and a lot of green and energy and New Manhattan. It's real estate developers, and they're all connected, and they all write checks, and they're all part of the left. And that's okay if they do the same thing for every other bank in the United States. But yesterday, Janet Yellen testified. Now, yesterday on this program, Ro Khanna, Democrat from Silicon Valley, maybe the smartest Democrat in the House, came on and said, look, clearly we've got to have one set of rules and we will make depositors good. And he specifically said if a Midland Bank, Texas, goes down and it's all oil and gas, even though he's been anti-oil and gas as a green guy from Silicon Valley, he would support bailing out the depositors. That's fine. That might even be necessary. It's an $8 trillion proposition. That's how many uninsured deposits there are in the United States. And Janet Yellen went up to the Senate yesterday to testify. She's been the chair of the Federal Reserve. She's been the Secretary of the Treasury. She is herself wealthy, and she herself knows how bankers work. And she didn't want to admit the obvious thing. The obvious thing is this banking crisis is caused by rising interest rates. Rising interest rates were caused by inflation. Inflation was caused by Joe Biden's reckless spending in the first year of his presidency, well into the second year of his presidency. That's where inflation took off. Everyone was wrong. Big, long article at the New York Times this morning about Biden. No one saw this high inflation coming. That's completely nuts. Everybody saw this coming the moment they passed the Build Back Better barrage of money in February, I think, of 2021, followed by the CHIPS Act, followed by the Infrastructure Act, followed by trillions more in deficit spending. Biden's been on a bender, and Janet Yellen will not admit to this. Cut number 3, she's engaged with Senator Tim Scott.
Secretary Yellen, will this administration acknowledge that their reckless tax and spending contributed to not only the challenges that we see in everyday households, but also to the challenges that we're facing today with SVB?
Look, inflation is too high, and it is the president's top priority to bring it down. And there are many contributors to why inflation is too high. Importantly, fallout from the pandemic and Russia's war on Ukraine that boosted food and energy prices. Many countries around the world suffer from the same problem.
The refusal of Team Biden to admit that the massive and unnecessary fiscal stimulus they spent in 2021 and 2022 has led to domestic inflation is one of the more maddening things, and it's repeated as a narrative. It's a political dodge. They don't want to own up that they flooded the world with money, and the money inflated the world's economy, and then it was exacerbated by Russia's second invasion of Ukraine, the first one of which occurred under the last Democratic president. Now, Ron Johnson is not buying Janet Yellen's testimony, and they go back and forth. Cut number 5.
But would you agree those are the top 3 causes of inflation? Deficit spending, high energy costs, and supply dislocations?
I don't believe that deficit spending is one of the main causes of inflation.
I mean, inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. Well, so when you're printing all this out, so do you know in the first 3 fiscal years of the Biden administration, you know how much the total deficit spending is going to be?
We had an economic collapse that was caused by
right,
the
and
pandemic.
we were certainly coming out of that because there's all this pent-up demand and a sloshing around of trillions of dollars.
The answer is, by the way, I believe $7 trillion. We were out of COVID. We had reopened the government that was shut down. We had made people whole. PPP had worked. And then Biden shows up and says, let's spend more billions. And then after that, let's spend more on infrastructure. And then after that, let's spend more on the CHIPS Act. And then after that, let's raise entitlement spending. A wash in red ink. In 2 years, Biden has spent as much deficit as Trump did in 4. And it's just getting worse. We're at $31 trillion. We've got to do something about it. But the key part of the banking crisis is, will you treat all depositors alike, regardless of whether they're a blue state bank, a blue bubble bank like Silicon Valley, SVB, or a blue bubble bank like Signature Bank in Manhattan, the depositors of which got 100% made whole, despite some extraordinarily stupid choices by chief financial officers who had, for example, I have brought up repeatedly Roku, because they're smart people and it's a revolutionary technology, and they were liquid. They had $1.8 billion in assets. They put $600 million of it in the Silicon Valley Bank. Well, tell me why. Who did that? Why are they around? Now, the tech titans are going to D.C. next week to have the Hill and Valley Summit about China. Good. Maybe someone should teach them basic accounting and how to be a CFO at the same time, because SVB is a geyser of misguidance and intrepid bets, and that's what brought down SVB. One more cut before I go. Well, let's go to the bank cut. James Lankford, a great friend of the show and senator from Oklahoma, raises the central question: are all deposits alike? And Janet Yellen does not have a good answer. Yesterday, Ro Khanna, a Democrat from Silicon Valley, said, oh, yes, absolutely. All deposits alike. We couldn't possibly screw A after we bailed out B, even though the Bs are blue and the As are red. Well, Janet Yellen gets asked that question by James Lankford in the course of exploring who's actually paying for this bailout. And the answer is you are, through your FDIC insurance premiums, no matter where you bank. But Senator Lankford goes deeper. Listen to the whole thing, cut number 4.
Will the deposits in every community bank in Oklahoma, regardless of their size, be fully insured now? Are they fully recovered? Every bank, every community bank in Oklahoma, regardless of the size of the deposit, will they get the same treatment that SVB just got or Signature Bank just got?
A bank only gets that treatment if a majority of the FDIC board, a supermajority of the Fed board, and I, in consultation with the president, determine that the failure to protect uninsured depositors would create systemic risk and significant economic and financial consequences.
So what is your plan?
We made that determination.
Right. So what is your plan to keep large depositors from moving their funds out of community banks into the big banks? We have seen the mergers of banks over the past decade. I'm concerned you're about to accelerate that by encouraging anyone who has a large deposit in a community bank to say, we're not going to make you whole, but if you go to one of our preferred banks, we will make you whole at that point.
Look, I mean, that's certainly not something that we're encouraging.
That is happening right now.
That is happening because depositors are concerned about the bank failures that have happened and whether or not other banks could also
No,
fail.
it's happening
And
because you're
it's-
fully insured no matter what the amount is if you're in a big bank. You're not fully insured if you're in a community bank.
Well, you're not fully insured. And
You
the big-
were at Signature, and
the
it just barely met that threshold. You were at Signature.
Well, we felt that there was a serious risk of contagion that could have brought down and triggered runs on many banks. And that's something, given that our judgment is that the banking system overall is safe and sound, depositors should have confidence in the system, and we took these actions.
So there's a
to
special
discourage
assessment that's been done
contagion.
on community banks in my state and all banks across the country. Was there any discussion that that special assessment would only apply to the larger banks, or was it always assumed the special assessment would cover every bank, including rural banks in my state?
I think I'm not certain what the rules are around that. That's for the FDIC to determine.
It has been reported publicly that SVB had a large number of Chinese investors that are there, including some that were companies directly connected to the Chinese Communist Party. will those individuals, companies, entities, and investors that are Chinese investors be made whole based on assessments in my banks in Oklahoma? So what I'm asking is, will my banks in Oklahoma pay a special assessment to be able to make Chinese investors whole from Silicon Valley Bank?
Uninsured investors will be made whole in that bank, and I suppose that could include foreign depositors, but I don't believe there's any legal basis to discriminate among uninsured.
I get it, but I'm just saying my community banks are going to pay this additional fee. It is always fascinating to me as well, the conversation that taxpayers are being made whole in this, that taxpayers are not going to have any kind of consequence on this. I'm sure my bankers are going to be very excited to know they no longer pay taxes, and their banks no longer pay taxes. Credit unions don't pay taxes, banks do, and so they're definitely taxpayers as well, and all banks make their revenue off of rates and fees and such to their account holders, which means every Oklahoman will pay higher fees in their community bank.
We're just going to have to move on.
If we have a collapse of the banking system and its economic consequences, that will have very severe effects on banks in Oklahoma that will also be threatened.
I'm just worried about the long-term
We are going to have to move
on our
on,
banks as well.
or we're not going to get all senators.
We have to move on because you've got Secretary Yellen pinned to the wall, Senator Langford. And the reason you've got her pinned to the wall is she said the risk of contagion is going to drive decisions to bail out. That means, how connected are you? How many people are on Twitter that use your banking services? Are you a friend of Sam Bankman-Fried? Did you invest in Theranos? Are you an SVB swag holder? That was not the right answer. That was not Ro Khanna's answer yesterday. 2 days ago, Ro Khanna on my program Thursday told me all depositors alike. Janet Yellen just told Senator Langford, nah, we know when we see it. We'll get involved when we have to. That is not the rule of law. That is the rule of the connected. That is the rule of the elites taking care of the elites. Have they seen each other at Jackson Hole at the annual gathering of the Fed? Did they go to the SVB gathering at the ski chalet? And it ought to be profoundly upsetting to all of you. I'm going to come back with Sarah Westwood and talk with her about what happens next on the Hill, because this is not a tenable answer. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Welcome back, America. Sarah Westwood, whom you can follow on Twitter at Sarah C. Westwood, is the investigative reporter with the Washington Examiner. Good morning, Sarah. How are you for our Friday chat? Can you hear me, Sarah?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, good. I want to begin by reading to you. Okay, we'll get it fixed. I want to read to you Roger Altman, what he said about what happened last weekend, and then compare it with what Janet Yellen said yesterday. What the authorities did over the weekend, by the way, he's the chair of Evercore, which is the fourth largest investment bank in the country. What the authorities did over the weekend was absolutely profound. They guaranteed the deposits, all of them, at Silicon Valley Bank. And what that really means, and they won't say it, and I'll come back to that, what that really means is that they have guaranteed the entire deposit base of the U.S. financial system, the entire deposit base. Why? Because you can't guarantee all the deposits in Silicon Valley Bank, and the next day say to depositors at First Republic, sorry, yours aren't guaranteed. Of course they are. And so this is a breathtaking step which effectively nationalizes or federalizes the deposit base of the U.S. financial system. There's more. Is that the talk of Congressional Hill, Sarah Westwood? Because it is an extraordinary change in 1 week.
It certainly was leading up to that hearing yesterday with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. And, it was remarkable that she said that's not going to be the policy of this administration. The federal government is not going to insure all deposits, but it's really, really the Biden administration has backed themselves into a corner. You almost wonder if this was a snap decision because Silicon Valley Bank is, uniquely elite, right? Most of its customers were very wealthy, very liberal, venture capitalists and tech entrepreneurs. That's not the sort of people that the Biden administration wants to look on the side of. If you have a smaller regional bank with, mom and pop shops as your depositors, and the Biden administration says that they're not going to bail out that bank, months down the road, how is the administration going to justify that? So I do think they've backed themselves into a corner where they may have to sort of guarantee all deposits moving forward.
Congressman Ro Khanna was on the program yesterday, Sarah Westwood, and said, everybody is ollie in free. And then Janet Yellen shows up 3 hours later and says, no, it depends on whether your failure is contagion. That means they're picking winners and losers. And that means we need to know who lobbied the White House from Signature Bank and SVB over the weekend. Do we have any idea who the depositors called or how often they called? Because they must have had every lobbyist on K Street working all last weekend.
Well, we know that Governor Gavin Newsom was likely among those who were sort of working behind the scenes to try to get a bailout for California. But what's interesting about what Yellen said, right, is that the board of the FDIC, of the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department has to decide whether these banks are too big to fail. SVB and Signature Bank both specifically lobbied to have the too big to fail designation taken off of them. Both of those banks argued that they should not be considered too big to fail, that they were just regional lenders, that they didn't have the sort of exposure and scope of the banks on Wall Street that do have that designation, that have to submit to the stress tests and all of the other requirements of Dodd-Frank. And in 2018, those regulations were rolled back. So SVB is a bank that promised if something ever happened to them, it wouldn't need a bailout. And then as soon as something really did materialize, they went to Washington begging for one.
Now, Patrick McHenry is chairman of House Banking or House Financial Services. Do you have any opportunity to talk to him, Sarah? We lost your picture there, about what is going to happen in the weeks and months ahead? Because I would like to have hearings from the House Financial Services Committee. Have you heard from him anything yet? No, we lost her. Doggone it. Whenever I lose, that's the key question. The key question is, will Patrick McHenry hold a hearing? Because yesterday, whoever is the Democrat chairing financial services or banking cut off Jim Lankford. And Jim Lankford was making the key point that you are pushing every deposit out of a community bank and into one of the big four, and maybe one of the big 20, because Signature and SVB were part of the big 20. But if you're a little bank in Midland or you're a little bank somewhere else, you have just screwed them all. And James Lankford has probably been hearing from his community bankers, like I've been hearing from bankers all week, about the unintended consequences of what was a rush decision. And it was a rush decision because the depositors were going to have a bad week. But they didn't articulate a policy. And I discussed this yesterday with former Solicitor General Paul Clement. When courts can decide either they're going to pay attention to what an administrative agency did or just give it Chevron deference. That isn't the rule of law. That's the rule of the judge. That's the rule of the connected. And what we have now lurched into with the Yellen testimony yesterday is the lurch of the insured versus the uninsured. And I don't know, my small business is not one that I have to worry about moving because I bank with a very fine bank. But I wonder how many people are spending this weekend making a very careful evaluation of where they bank and whether or not this whole deal is going to end up making the 4 super banks the depository of choice. They've really screwed this up. But then again, it's the Biden administration. There isn't anything that they touch that doesn't end up like the Afghanistan collapse. Everything ends up like the Afghanistan collapse because they are not competent and they do not understand how uncertainty spooks markets. And they just did it yesterday. Unbelievable. Time to go back in time to Joseph Chamberlain with Dr. Larry Arnn. The Hillsdale Dialogue is coming up, America. Stay tuned for it. We'll do a little walk down, just get our blood pressure down because it could be another wild weekend in the financial markets. Stay tuned. I'll be right back with Dr. Larry Arnn of Hillsdale.edu. All things Hillsdale, straight ahead on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
This hour of Hugh Hewitt starts right now on Salem News Channel.
Morning glory, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Coming up, the Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. And today we begin a study of Joseph Chamberlain, an archetype from the Victorian era that Winston Churchill knew well and writes about in Great Contemporary. Stay tuned. I'm coming back with Dr. Arnn.
You won't want to miss a minute. This hour of Hugh Hewitt is on Salem News Channel.